Brilliant. Here's Tom Hunt. Tom, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, let's kick off first of all with Keir Starmer. You know, he's on his sort of world tour at the moment. Yesterday, he turns up in Paris looking like something out of Casablanca, standing in an armoured vehicle with Emmanuel Macron. I think that's one of the most ridiculous images of any Prime Minister that I've ever seen in my life. It's the first time since Churchill did it that any British Prime Minister has decided to go to France for Armistice Day. His defenders say, well, of course he went there because it's the 80th anniversary of Armistice Day, but it just looked a bit weird, didn't it?
Well, that's the first time I've seen that picture, that image, so that's thanks for sharing. But no, he does seem to like travelling a lot, Keir Starmer. I mean, I think that, some people say that, when a Prime Minister had a long term and, in their 9th or 10th year, they often, rely on international travel to escape the pitfalls of domestic politics, but it didn't take Starmer long to embrace international travel. I mean, I don't know what the number of trips he's done now is, but it's...
Well, I think I'm right in saying he's now spent more time away from the UK since he's been Prime Minister than he has actually in it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. Well, I mean, look, his poll rating has absolutely collapsed since he became Prime Minister, so perhaps he doesn't want to be around too many of those people who are saying they don't like him.
Yeah, exactly right. And now he's gone to Baku in Azerbaijan, where basically most foreign Prime Ministers and leaders haven't gone because it's a waste of time, because the one thing that you know about COP29 is the only decision they'll make is where they go for COP30, which I think they've already decided is in Brazil. They achieve nothing, they spend an awful lot of money. It's an oil-rich nation. It's already a nation where they're locking up political prisoners. Maybe that's why he likes it. Maybe he prefers to go to a place where he feels at home. But the Taliban are actually visiting to take part in COP29. I mean, if that doesn't tell you what a busted flush the whole thing is, I don't know what does.
No, I mean, I couldn't really tell you what the Taliban's position is on net zero. I mean, I don't. But I have to say, if there's a list of things I wanted to talk to the Taliban about, I think net zero would probably be sort of quite a way down there. I think probably closer to the top would be the appalling way they treat women.
Yeah, exactly right.
Else.
Net zero women, I think, is their position on net zero. But let's talk about some of the ramifications, though, of COP29, because, seriously speaking, you've got Ed Miliband careering around the place talking about how important it is for us to hit these targets, which even he, I'm sure, doesn't actually believe. But in the papers this morning, The Sun's got a piece on page 10, I think, saying that new homes will be banned from having gas boilers. So, there is this move away from what I would call common sense energy policy to this kind of nutty, let's all try and save the planet single-handedly, one house at a time, from Labour. And, I mean, I have to say, Tom, the Tories were just as guilty when they were in charge.
Well, I mean, I think this is a global challenge. I am somebody who believes climate change, in my view, does exist. But hang on. Nobody doesn't agree with the fact that there is climate change. I don't think anybody would say that. No.
But it's about how we deal with it and whether. I mean, we have now. I had a guy in here from the Climate Party yesterday who confessed to me that we have reduced our carbon footprint over the past 10 to 15 years by 42%. Right. What more can we do? How much more can you squeeze people?
Well, no, I agree. I mean, I was just about to say, I mean, though I'm not somebody who believes that it doesn't exist. In my view, it does exist. But we have to take a pragmatic and common sense pathway to cutting our emissions. And actually, if other countries, which are far bigger countries, more powerful countries than us, are not doing that, and their emissions are still incredibly high, much higher than ours. And the other thing is, if we diminish our economic power, if we impoverish ourselves while looking to do this, then actually probably we lose influence as a country on a global level, and probably lose clout when it comes to trying to get cut carbon emissions in future. So, look, whilst China and other countries such as them, it looks like the US under Trump are going to take a different approach now. We've really got to think about, what I want, though, is I want a UK government, an elected government that puts the British interest first, that puts the interest of the British people first, and is unashamed in doing that, who cooperates with other countries, but says, look, my overriding priority, what gets me up in the morning, is what's best for the British taxpayer, what's best for the regular British family, and actually putting too many costs on people, particularly when other countries aren't doing it. I think relatively it impoverishes us compared to those other countries. We lose clout on the world stage, and it's not a good thing.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've always said this. If you can make it cheaper, let's by all means do it. You know, if you can show me that, you know, if I change my gas boiler over to a heat pump and I save money, then I'll do it. And loads of people would do the same. If you can show me that driving an electric car is cheaper than driving a regular car, then I'll get one. But, you know, at the moment, it's not the case. And even with government subsidies, which cost us all money as taxpayers, you know, there is no pathway, it seems to me, to cheaper energy by any means other than by having fossil fuels.
Well, look, we've seen the President-elect, President Trump's approach to this, and you know, his view is, you know, if we are going to use fossil fuels, you know, better use them when they're in our own backyard than import fossil fuels from abroad. You know, we've got this ridiculous situation where, look, we want to have a pathway, medium, long term, to phasing them out, but in the short term, we have to use some of them. Far better to use the ones which are in our own country, which can generate jobs when we're doing it, boost our energy security so we're not dependent on other regimes when we're doing it. But of course, you know, the Labour Party turned their back on that because they got rid of the North Sea drilling projects and contracts. And I think that, you know, the Labour Party's got one approach to it, and clearly President-elect Trump's got a different approach to it. And I think one approach is good for energy security of that nation in question, good for jobs, and the other one isn't, and will probably produce more expensive energy going forward. So, but look, that's the government we've got right now.
And that is the problem as well, because a lot of people remain unconvinced that whatever it is that we do, it won't really make any difference. And I mean, you might talk about, you know, years to come or decades to come or even generations to come. But for now, having reduced our carbon footprint by 42%, nothing seems to have changed. In fact, if anything, the climate's changing even quicker.
I think the reason why people don't like a lot of these, you know, are a bit suspicious about these sort of COP projects is they just think it's sort of like it's global, you know, backslapping. You know, it's the sort of the great and the good. It's the glitterati. They all go and drink their smoothies. All talk about how wonderful they are and virtual signal for days on end. Look, you know, without just getting on with doing things.
Yeah, but it's also about money, isn't it, Tom? Because, you know, Keir Starmer's being asked to contribute to a sort of £1 trillion fund to help climate change in all sorts of other parts of the world. Ed Miliband's got a massive budget to give hundreds of millions of pounds to different countries around the world to help fight climate change. Well, what's that got to do with us?
Well, look, what concerns me, though, is I think we've already seen over things like the Chagos Islands and to a certain extent about these reparation debate as well, that actually when the pressure is put on Keir Starmer from other countries to do things that may be against the British interest, he's not all that good at standing up for our country's interests. So my concern about things like this, when we've got all these multi-billion-pound asks from our country, is actually Keir Starmer will fold and give in. You know, he's already proven that he's done that on the Chagos, he's done that on the reparations, where he signed a contract opening up a debate about it at the last Commonwealth Summit. You know, this isn't somebody who is proving that he's got the strength and the resolve to stand up for what's in the interest of British people. He puts that secondary to getting on with the global glitterati. I think he's shown that already. My concern is he'll show it again.
No, quite. Let's talk about the assisted dying bills. I know you've got an interest in that. It's sort of been laid out for us about how it will kind of be unfolded, I suppose. Labour MP Kim Ledbetter has put out her plan for what the bill will say, and it says basically, amongst many other things, terminally ill patients could be allowed to kill themselves in 3 weeks under this new assisted dying bill. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, my concern is that I don't think there's been. I think this has been introduced, or varieties of this have been introduced in a large number of jurisdictions throughout the world, not just countries, but US states, or Australian states. And whenever it's been introduced in these different jurisdictions, they've always said there's going to be lots of safeguards. This is going to be the safest one in the world. But every single time, there have been issues, and there have been appalling case studies where vulnerable people have been put under pressure, have been made to feel like they're a burden. And that is my concern. Is they cannot point to a single example where this has been introduced, that within short order, there haven't been major issues. So that is my concern. It makes me very nervous.
I mean, it seems to me that the way the system works at the moment, while it might have a few kind of hiccups in it, for example, people being questioned by the police if they aid one of their loved ones in Switzerland or somewhere like Dignitas, but nobody, as far as I'm aware, has ever been prosecuted for assisted dying, have they?
I think it's there's the status quo isn't perfect, but certainly there is scope for common sense to be introduced. But what concerns me is, when it was introduced in Canada in 2016, they said that it's only going to apply to a really small number of people. I think the last stats I saw was that over 4% of all deaths in Canada are now linked to it. And what is more is the scope in Canada has been extended. So it's now including people who have got mental illness, not just terminal. And there's concerns you've got young people with anorexia, for example. And there's also the casual way that it's sort of being introduced to people in conversation. So you can imagine like your mum or your gran going to hospital to undergo treatment, and the sort of the doctor just sort of casually saying, "Oh, have you thought about this, by the way?" Yeah. There's something about it which is quite chilling. Yeah. And the other thing is that tough cases make bad law. And I don't doubt the fact that there are some tough cases here. And I think that, I've got great respect for both sides of the argument. But I just think in practice, it doesn't matter how tough you think the safeguards are going to be. And the other point about this bill is that it's only going to be looked at and scrutinised for a little over 2 weeks, which is a bill of monumental significance, and it is being rushed through Parliament. And I'm really concerned about it. Yes, I think you've got one case in Oregon, for example, where it was introduced, where recent polling shows that almost 50% of those who went for the option said they felt like a burden. Yeah. It's a real concern to me. Yes, I agree. And we're going to be talking to somebody later on about the speed with which it's being digested by Parliament. But also, as I say, I feel as though it's a difficult subject. Yes, maybe there are things that are wrong with the current system, but it seems to work by and large in most situations where, people might be spoken to, they might be investigated, but by and large they're not prosecuted, and you can look at each case on its merits. Whereas if this, as you say, slippery slope was kind of allowed in, suddenly you don't know where you'd end up. Yeah, it is. And also, there were some concerns raised over the weekend, actually, about the ECHR. Yeah. And they were saying, so at the moment, the bill says the scope's going to be very narrow. It's only going to apply to people who are terminally ill and are going to die within 6 months. By the way, judging that isn't the easiest thing in the world. There's people who have been judged to only have 6 months left who have been alive years later. Right. But the concern is actually the ECHR will pry open those safeguards and then extend its scope. So all of a sudden, if you're somebody who's got a mental illness, you can say under ECHR, well, why am I excluded? Why are we discriminated against? So, and there's been no answer to those questions about the ECHR. So look, this is an issue of concern. It was defeated comprehensively in 2015. I think it's one of those things that the more people learn about it, the more they look at the detail, the more they come around to have concerns and to hopefully eventually oppose this bill. That's what happened in 2015. I hope it's what happens again. OK. Tom Hunt, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, former Conservative MP, talking there about the right to die.